Hello, authors, book lovers, and storytellers, and welcome to another exciting episode of Reader's Magnet featured author interview, where we dive deep into the world of creativity and inspiration. And today we're excited to have Mr. Rucker, a historian with over 40 years of expertise in constitutional theory and America's founding. And his deep study of original documents and advocacy for constitutional liberty have shaped his insightful perspectives. And also, with a background in government and organizations, Mr. Rucker excels in crafting historical fiction that brings pivotal moments to life. And today, we'll discuss his work on the Continental Congress, the American Revolution, and his unique approach to storytelling. So without further ado, please help me welcome Mr. Russell J. Rucker. Mr. Rucker, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Good afternoon. It's nice to talk to you today.
Good afternoon to you. And by the way, so again, to all of our viewers, as you can see, Philadelphia to Yorktown is in the works right now. It's about to be published and will be available soon in a month or two. So if ever you want to get some updates, though, Mr. Rucker has a website and we'll be posting it later on. But without further ado, just Mr. Rucker, please indulge us. Please tell us, what are your books all about when it comes with all of these that you have created so far?
Well, what I've really tried to do and what I started trying to do was better explain our Constitution, what it means, and that kind of thing. And I started getting into historical aspects in order to show the original intent of some of our documents, not just the Constitution, but the Declaration, our Bill of Rights, the Articles of Confederation, all that kind of thing. And that was really my primary goal when I got in and started writing these books.
Love it. And, talking about, because I'm seeing that there's, again, you do have the expertise when it comes with history, but what do you really find interesting about historical, because writing books, it's all about historical fiction. So what do you find interesting about it then?
Well, several of my books are straight fiction, and I started writing historical fiction because I thought I could get a better insight into make people better understand what was happening. So in order to try to bring them into the room, per se, and try to make them better understand what was occurring. So I started going through records and I started putting things into first person, so they were actually talking, so you could actually kind of witness what was happening. And that's what I really like about historical fiction, is you're able to, it's more, gives it more of a story vibe. I wanted more people to actually read it. It's history can be kind of dry when you're just looking at the names and the dates and that. And I just really wanted to bring it to life and hopefully get more people interested in reading it.
Yeah, and I do agree with this, Russell. Because again, thinking about me though, when I see history books and when I try to open one, it's just that, and yeah, I do agree with the term. It's a bit dry because you just get these names, what they have done, and what happened, and that's it. It's just just a lot of information that goes into your head, and it just goes, and then that's it. Like you just read a book just for the sake of reading information and whatnot. But again, talking about your books, and you're telling me so. Tell me and indulge me. Is this something like looking at a point of view of someone or any character within these historical events that we're trying to portray in your books?
Well, like the Philadelphia Yorktown that we're
Sure.
starting into, I used one of our founders. I used John Adams as the main character. He was there throughout for the most
Okay.
part. And so I went through, I had letters that had been published and diary records and that. So I kind of could follow and find out what exactly was going on, who they were meeting and all that. So I kind of used him and his interaction with all these other founders that were also there to try to help tell the story and what exactly was going on. So as you start in the Continental Congress, which is what that book is about, he comes in off the stage. He's meeting people as they're gathering because they're coming out of town, out of Philadelphia to meet the stage, and all these different delegates coming from all over the continent, from all the different colonies. And
Hmm.
so I just kind of follow him and follow what's occurring through it to kind of help tell the story of how they set up our government. Okay,
Oh.
because the Continental Congress was really the first time we were acting as a country. Prior to that, you were Bostonians, you were Carolinians, you were from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts or Virginia. But
Hmm.
once you gathered with these different representatives, then you were acting more as for the country, less than of your colony. So I tried to kind of march through using him because I had a lot of information, a lot of letters from him. So I was able to go through and what was going on, what he was thinking. And so you're going through initially trying to find some kind of reconciliation with the king.
Hmm.
This is shortly after the Boston Tea Party.
Okay.
And then I get into the founding of the Declaration, the signing of it, and eventually working into getting an Articles of Confederation up, which was our first Constitution.
Hmm. Okay. And so what I'm hearing from you, again, Philadelphia to Yorktown. So you basically have written an entire book on the Continental Congress.
Yeah.
Is there anything about it that you really find it so interesting and intriguing that you really pushed forward and made it a book then?
Well, I think really, setting up our government is
Hmm.
what it comes down to, and I highlighted the areas that pertain. The book is actually like book one, two, three, and four, and
Oh.
it goes through different sections. So book one is the first Continental Congress, and in book two, they're coming back and
Hmm.
they're re-meeting, and book three is the arguments of independence, uh, emanating to July 4th, the signing, and then book four really is getting the Articles of Confederation up. And the reason it's Philadelphia to Yorktown
Hmm.
is it wasn't all done in Philadelphia. It had to be moved.
Oh. Well, that's something. And again, you keep on mentioning Congress, and again during that time, again Boston Tea Party, those things. We were at war, and again it was really fascinating because again everything started during that time. But is there anything that you have learned that you would really pertain to today then?
Well, I think the ability to get along with the others. It's just like when you have Congress today and you have
Hmm.
different factions in Congress trying to get together and trying to come to pass any piece of legislation to do anything that we would think would be good for the country. So too did they. They had to start with that because in
Hmm.
the beginning they, like I mentioned, they were more colonists. Okay. Way back they talked about how they were the most loyal subject to the king, and that was an idea of honor to them. And
Hmm.
as they proceeded through the Stamp Act and the Port Bill and all these different things that the king was doing, they became less and less wanting to be for the king, and they wanted independence because they were kind of driven to it. A lot of them were more worried about their shops and
Hmm.
their businesses and how it would affect that. But you did have a couple like Samuel Adams and John Hancock that were bent on causing a revolution. They wanted independence, really at all costs. They were antagonists. So many of the people, many of our founders, were kind of dragged to it because they weren't really wanting it to begin with.
Oh.
But you had a couple of them really, really working towards it, if
Hmm.
that makes sense to you.
Hey, that really makes sense to me. And it's, how do I say this? It's because again, talking about what happened in the past and what happening right now, though, there are a lot of mismatches. Again, it's just it always boils down on how everything moves along, though, with people trying to make sure that again we need to get along. And that is
Right.
one thing. And talking about getting along here, and I'm sorry, but I've just been noticing because again, I was looking at your cover of book. I'm looking at the background. I see a couple of books as well that I do know that these books are already published and are available for people to get. And I've noticed that there is a painting or a drawing at your side. And yeah, I asked you earlier about it. You talked about Boston. Is there anything much more? Because is what does this signify though? That map that you have right now at the bottom of your book cover on your poster, because it's just
Yeah.
something I'm really curious, and maybe a lot of people are curious as well. Like, what is that drawing for, and what is that map for?
Well, it's a map of Boston,
Mm-hmm.
and I use it in the YouTube channel a lot.
Oh,
Trying to show what happened in history. Where was the Liberty Tree, for instance, so I can
oh,
point to it and show you where it was, and where were they, at the Frail Hall and
mm.
some of the other halls meeting uh, before they went to the Tea Party, and the Ed's printing shop
Oh,
where they were meeting, and the Sons of Liberty and the Loyal Nine were meeting, and where was the North Church, the Boston, where they got Paul Revere and Dow's to go out and warn that the British were coming. So you have all those events. The Boston Massacre
hmm.
happens in Boston. There's a tremendous amount of things going on in Boston. It was kind of the center of the beginning of our revolution. That's
Oh,
where it began.
oh,
And so I
okay.
use that map to try to show what it was. And what's nice about that map is it's not a modern map. It's a map of the time. It's from the year 1769. So
Wow.
we began our revolutionary period really begins in about 1774. So that map really is only 4 or 5 years prior to the beginning of all the troubles we had there.
Wow, love it. And again, it's more of a visual aid as well in helping you guide people. Because again, the maps we have right now is kind of a bit different from what we had in the past. Like a lot has changed, and using that map to at least guide these people, even me, like I wouldn't even know that that map can be used to. It was done years prior before the revolution happened. And again, talking more about pictures on your book cover, you do have four separate pictures. Is there any meaning within these photos that we should know about?
Yeah, Philadelphia to Yorktown really is a book that follows the Continental Congress. So when they first get to the Continental Congress, they meet at Carpenter's Hall. Carpenter's Hall is the lower left picture of the four pictures. When they come back the next spring, they're up at what we call Independence Hall. It's the Philadelphia State House, and that is right above Carpenter's Hall in the painting.
Wow,
And
love
and
it.
then they go over to they have to flee.
Hmm.
The they have to flee because the Britain comes in and they take over Philadelphia. So they're forced to move their government.
Mm-hmm.
This is after we declare independence. And throughout the whole book, the war is going on, and they're working at trying to fund the war, trying to raise troops, and all this stuff also. So you really got two things going on in the Continental Congress. You have the war going on and all the supplying of the war. And then you have uh, them trying to set up a government. Initially, in the first meeting, they're just trying to find a way to explain to the king. They're trying to get him to come along. So you got the Olive Branch petition, which was the last attempt at peace.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the city's invaded, they have to leave, and they go first to the upper picture on the other side is the next stop. They're only there for a day. It's Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and they meet there for one day,
Mm-hmm.
and they go up into the steeple tower, and they're looking around there, and they see the river off in the distance, and they think that's a natural barrier because it would be hard to move the army across the river. And so the final picture, in the lower right, you can see the wagon there, and up on
Hmm.
the hill about the center top, you'll see a steeple there. That's the only known picture of Yorktown. It's
Oh.
now called York, Pennsylvania, but at the time it was Yorktown. And Yorktown was a last drop off point for wagons going west because, you know, throughout the entire period of our founding and going for the next 100 years, we're settling further and further west. Well, there you have the mud streets. And when it rained, it was like ice, it was a mess.
Oh.
Okay. You had, when they were in Philadelphia, they really had the fine restaurants. They had brick streets. It was a very
Hmm.
modern city for the day. It was a beautiful place, and they had to leave uprooted, and they're down in just uh, a really kind of rundown mud street area with absolutely um, uh, nothing of any quality there.
Okay.
So they went from one extreme to the other. And the Yorktown is where the Articles of Confederation was finally written. And once the Articles of Confederation are approved, it becomes the Congress of the Confederation.
Hmm.
So I'm just going through the Continental Congresses. Once you get that written up, that's where the book ends. Is
Oh.
is is when you get the Articles of Confederation passed, and it becomes a whole different period then. But it's really interesting, especially kind of the flight to the city. They're spending weeks deciding what to do, what to take with them when they have to leave, if they have to leave. They're hoping that Washington can hold them off.
Hmm.
The problem is it had rained for such a long stretch of time, and their gunpowder wasn't any good, and they really had no way of holding off the British. So the British went in and they took the city, and they all fled all out in the distance and tried to regroup over in Lancaster and wound up down in Yorktown. So that's kind of the history of the period. It's really interesting.
Love it, and I really love it, and it gives me that better idea though, and it makes me want to grab a copy and try to see on how I can learn history through the eyes of one of the characters again. But again, I'm not a history buff, and there are a lot of history buffs out there who love to read history books. So, Mr. Rucker, just one question here: why should people read your book then, than just opening a normal history book just to know the history?
Well, because if you open up a history book, you're going to get facts and stuff.
Hmm.
You're going to get, they crossed the Delaware here, and then they went and they attacked over there. You're going to get the facts.
Okay.
Okay. What I'm doing in historical fiction is I'm still giving the facts. I'm just not I'm not changing that narrative. I'm just trying to bring it forward, what was said, what they were arguing about, what they were discussing, and all that. It brings it more so you get it puts it in more of a story form and makes people really get so you can almost live it again. And with historical fiction, um, one of the things I never really loved about it was because you could take something and they could bend it so it had something completely different and it just wasn't true anymore. But
Hmm.
that's not true with what I've done. I've tried to make it more of a hybrid. So you've got the historical, you've got the fiction, or you've got the nonfiction story,
Hmm.
but I've tried to bring it to life more, so it's still real. It's not altered. I have not altered history. I've just tried to bring it alive to let people understand it better. You know, one thing that comes to mind right now is Paul Revere's ride out from Boston into
Hmm.
Lexington, and a lot of people, I've heard a lot of things said that the reason he's there is because of that poem that was written 100 years later, and that he wasn't really that important, but he was. He was a rider between Washington and the Continental Congress. That's how they got things out. They didn't have a telegraph then. The mail moved slow, and it was the only way to get information back and forth. So Paul Revere was one of these riders that they used to get information back and forth, and that's a real interesting thing there. On the ride out, the colonists actually pulled up the boards out of the bridges. So once he passed, so the British couldn't follow him that well. They couldn't get a wagon over without rebuilding the bridge. So there were lots of different things like that took place. But I think it's really important to give people a real good idea of what they're, and to put it in a story form. It makes more people want to read it because it's more interesting. It's more exciting.
And yeah, I do agree with that. And if and to all of our viewers though, if that didn't change your mind about history, then again, feel free to grab a copy. Again, it's going to be soon available. And this is one thing that I really love about how you wrote this and how you explain things. Instead of just the drab and dry facts of what happened, you're bringing the story to life, which means we will be part of that story, seeing it through another person's eyes. And that is something that might get me as well back to history. Maybe, who knows? Maybe I'll be one of those people who'll be loving to read more of your future books. So again, I just want to give a heads up though, and to all of our viewers and book lovers, again, be sure to grab a copy of Mr. Russell J. Rucker's books. Again, it's available through Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and basically the Philadelphia to Yorktown book will soon be available. And if you want to get updates and check out more, feel free to visit his website. That is www.russelljrucker.com. As you're seeing on screen, that's RussellJrucker.com. And you know what, Mr. Rucker, just want to say this though. Thank you very much for joining us, sharing your insight as well. And I really, really love that even though that this is something new to me, it's not really something new to me, but it's something that gets me excited and giddy to at least pick up a book and try to read more about this history. And I'm looking forward for your future of books in the future as well. Thank you very much for your presence, Mr. Rucker.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for your time.
Really appreciate it. And again, to all of our viewers, thank you very much for tuning in. And I want to again say this, that always remember that every ending is just a new beginning in the world of stories. May your reading adventures be endless and your imagination boundless. And as we say here at Reader's Magnet, we share your stories with the world. Thank you and have a good one. Bye-bye.